Anyway, this is why I'm mad about a building.
My kid who had a nosebleed?
Yes, you did.
I didn't
Did I tell
hear.
You that he ran through the hallway like an axe murderer?
Yes, you did.
Okay, just making sure.
Wait.
Covered in blood, sprinting down the hallway.
What are we talking about?
It was one of the voice memos she sent us.
Oh, I only listened to half of those.
Okay,
That's
well,
fine.
one of them was that
There was this...
Yeah.
One of my kids got a terrible nosebleed.
Yeah, you did tell us that.
And he took off down the hallway like a fucking
one.
axe murderer. He looked like he just ate someone. Just covered head to toe in blood. And I was like, this is my life. Just running after him.
You two both had to deal with people who were really dumb about COVID. I will leave it at that.
Yes.
Yeah.
My professor in half of one of my classes apparently thinks we need to rewrite the entire goddamn Constitution so that Twitter has to follow the same laws as the government. Like,
in unrelated news, I'm running for Twitter.
Twitter will now be an elected position.
The town twit.
Yeah. We're all... This week was just a massive shit show for so many different reasons. It was horrible.
I cried at least twice. It was just so bad. It was so bad.
I almost cried out of frustration in class because I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I was getting so frustrated.
I had an old lady yell at me because she couldn't find a denim shirt.
Okay,
Yep.
Grandma, like...
Oh, man.
She was like, do you have any denim shirts? And I was like, no, we have denim jackets, denim skirts, denim jeans, but
we have literally everything except denim shirts.
No denim shirts because this is 2021. And she was like, that's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And I was like, well, better believe it because it's true. So,
it's not the late 80s anymore.
Also, I don't know why you're yelling at me. I don't make this decision.
Right? Like, I'm literally...
Yeah, how fucking dare you, Shelby, not get onto that production line and demand more denim shirts?
First of all, they're called chambray. Second of all...
Dude, I started
I've
watching
only worked here for, like, less than 2 weeks. Okay? Like, leave me alone. I don't do anything. I don't even know how to run a register.
That LuLaRoe documentary.
Yay!
Oh my god, it's the best.
We finished it last night.
Crazy. I'm on the second episode, I think. I don't know. I'm just waiting to see my dress pop up. I'm like really excited for it because I do have 2 LuLaRoe dresses. I didn't buy them myself. My mother bought them for me, but I didn't know they were crazy people.
Oh, they're batshit. Just wait, because in the 3rd episode, you learn about, they're very sexist, and I'll just leave it at that, and you'll see how bad it is whenever you get there.
Yeah, when they were like, it's utterly nonsense that
I
women
know,
are selling their breast milk. I was like, shut up!
I know, that dude is such a
What wrong
creep.
with you?
They're
both such creepers.
Disgusting.
Her eyes, I don't think she knows how to blink. I
know, like, she doesn't blink.
I think they're glued open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, everyone should watch that documentary. It's on Amazon.
Called
It's
Lula
crazy.
Rich. It's fascinating.
Who knew? I didn't know
It's
it was
batshit.
an MLM.
Yeah, it's bad shit. Can we go ahead and do the intro before we keep talking?
Shit, yeah,
Yeah.
You're fine.
Hey guys, you're listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive, especially sensitive today.
Yep.
And I'm Shelby.
I'm Hannah.
I'm Shannon.
Woo. Okay.
Yay. Okay, do we have any, like, actual announcements that aren't us ranting?
I'm finally getting that money that I won from that award
Oh,
that I
good!
won.
Yay. Shelby, do you have any announcements?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't think I do either.
Random other announcement, fuck the state of Texas and their government, and also Planned Parenthood is filing a lawsuit against the state of Texas, so...
Yeah. Oh, also, did you see? So it was. Hang on. Let me see. I think it was Illinois. Yeah. So in Illinois, the Democrats in the Illinois legislature are sponsoring a law in Illinois that would place a $10,000 bounty on anyone who causes an unwanted pregnancy or anyone who commits sexual assault or abuse, including domestic violence. It's called the Expanding Abortion Services Act, or Texas.
Hold on. Illinois Democrats have never been good. Like, they've all gone to jail.
Not. They're all
forever.
terrible.
Right, like, they're
This is
shitty
the first
as a
good
whole,
thing that
but I'm appreciating the petty level of that.
Oh my god. This is the first time I've ever liked a Democrat in Illinois.
I know.
Right? Oh my god.
Yeah, it's literally the same law, but it's flipped around. So it goes after the abusers and the people who caused the pregnancy.
Hell
Well,
yeah,
good.
because that's who should be punished.
Yeah, which, like, there's no way in hell this is gonna pass, but
No, but I appreciate it.
it's
But
symbolic.
it's on the what's it called? The record forever.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
It's on the record. It's a symbolic gesture, and I fucking love it. Like,
And the fact that they, like, purposely created a title so that it could spell out Texas.
uh-huh.
as
I
an
always wonder who
acronym.
makes those. Like, is it just some staffer kid who they're like, hey, are you good at, like, not
Acronyms.
Right.
anagrams, what's that called?
It's
Acronyms.
whatever
Acronyms.
the, like, it's one of their unpaid interns.
Yeah. Which
They
have
come up with a
lot of,
clever
believe me.
name.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
Oh, I'm sure.
not just that.
Hey,
it's-
Josh, you watch TikTok, right?
Yeah.
Go solve this.
The government likes to have unpaid interns. It's just a thing. But yeah, so I just remembered that. It's so fucking funny.
I friggin' love that. I hate this state so much in so many ways, and that
This is the
that
one good
thing.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Okay. Are we ready to talk about the topic now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Shelby, is it in your folder or the episodes folder?
It's in the episodes folder. I hope
Okay.
I put the right number, but
You did.
honestly, okay, cool.
Oh,
I love your
yeah.
title.
I don't think I've heard of this.
I think I know what this is, maybe?
Maybe.
I don't think I do.
Hannah might, just because, like, you're an English major sort of thing. It's speech pathology related. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, so
great.
today we are going to be talking about the monster study, which, as my subtitle suggests, is some highly unethical and fucked up shit that they let researchers do in 1939. Which
Wasn't everyone doing fucked up shit in 1939?
Yeah.
right?
Who wasn't?
That was
I mean,
a bad year for
honestly.
humanity.
God,
For
eugenics?
humanity and just for oh yeah, like eugenics doesn't play a part in the study per se.
No, but this was like the heyday. They were like, yeah, let's just, everyone get sterilized. It's cool.
Oh, I'm just saying it'll come up a little bit at
Yeah.
the end. Not necessarily eugenics, but just like
It's eugenic adjacent.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like Nazi thought process. We'll go
Yeah.
with that.
Which, like,
Um,
39, bad year, because that was also the year that the Nazis invaded Poland. So
Exactly. So
It was a bad year.
yeah.
I've just remembered that Google search that I will never forget that just said, like, when you type in, I was looking up at, like, a specific fact, but it said, what did Russia do to Poland? And it was just so sad.
What did Russia not do to Poland?
Yeah.
What did Russia not do to What did Russia and Germany conjunctively not do to Poland? Like,
Right.
everyone got fucked in the end.
Poor Poland.
Oh, man.
Freaking Poland.
But yeah, anyway, so the monster study is very much an American thing. It happened in Iowa, but yeah, like you guys
Fucking
said,
Iowa.
it was a bad year.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, everyone knows I don't like Iowa for completely absurd and
Wait,
not
what?
real
I didn't know
reasons.
Now,
Oh,
you
I
never
just-
actually talked about that.
I feel like I've mentioned it, the fact that I hate Iowa.
No?
Yeah, because every time I drive through it, something shitty happens.
Yeah, see, I knew that. I don't know if you've ever actually talked about it on the show.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, again, I hate the state of Iowa for completely absurd and not real reasons. It's because I've never actually, like, stayed in Iowa. I just drive through it a lot because my family lives up north and I live in Illinois, and it's, like, the fastest way to get to Minnesota. But every time I drive through it, something shitty happens. Also, you're driving for, like, 4 hours and you never go anywhere because the entire state looks the exact same and there's no landmarks whatsoever. And
I guess I have similar feelings about Ohio.
yeah, so it's not a real reason to hate the state of Iowa. Also, it smells terrible.
It smells so bad.
Like, it smells like a fart. And, like, this is coming from someone who actually likes the smell of, like, dairy farms.
Fart?
No. No, because, like, my grandpa was a dairy farmer, and so, like, I grew up...
It brings up good memories. Gotcha.
Summers on a farm, and so, like, I'm used to the smell. I don't know, this sounds gross, but I'm used to the smell of, like, cow manure, and so, like, it doesn't bother me. And it just, like, reminds me of my childhood. But, it's not that I like the smell. It just doesn't bother me.
I know. Listen, I'm a lot slap happy, let's be real. Like, everything
guys,
is really
like...
silly to me. And so I can't stop myself from saying the things that come into my head.
Oh, fine. No, you're fine.
My filter has fallen out.
That's
but
fine.
yeah, like, Iowa is, like, all farmland and, like, all farms. And I, as someone who does not mind the smell of farms, thinks that the entire state smells like a fart, and it is disgusting, and I hate it. And also, like, one time me and my mom were driving through there and got, like, 2 speeding tickets, but, like, weren't ever pulled over. They were just, like, camera ones, and we were like, we weren't speeding, though. So, yeah, it was really freaking annoying. So I just, hate the state of Iowa for no reason. It's fine. Doesn't matter. Anyway. This study took place in the state of Iowa. All to say that. And you'll figure out if you want to go to slide 2. It's obviously not called the monster study, the actual study that was performed, or like researched or whatever. That's just what people within the field call it, because it was so terrible, and you will see why as we get into it.
Real quick. I just want to say, so whenever Shelby asked, what should I do this week? I said, maybe not a bummer, because we just did the Donner Party. And then she ignored me.
And here we are, in Bummer Town.
Yeah.
I tried, guys.
It's not as much of a bummer as the Donner Party, but it does make me very angry. Okay?
Yeah.
I was trying to explain to someone what this podcast was about, and I did too. I prefaced it with, like, we do a lot of ghost stuff, but then I didn't want to say, but also, like, a lot of really sad shit.
Yeah.
Right?
I want people to listen to us, but I don't want people to, like, hate us.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, sorry everybody who I've ever told about this.
Our coping mechanism, so just like
y'all are subject to it too. Sorry.
Look, at least we're not this sad.
Yeah.
Could be worse. We didn't need each other.
Oh, I don't think that makes it. Okay. Anyway.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness.
Let's just end the episode right here.
Right?
The end. Goodbye.
We all had a week for very different reasons, and yet similar reasons in a lot of ways, and so, like...
yeah, it's...
Here's what I'll say, because I am just really tired of having to deal with the consequences of other people's stupid decisions.
Yeah.
If I have to... They're all COVID-related decisions. Anyway, that's all. Goodbye. I'm fucking over it.
Yeah.
I might have to go get COVID tested today. I'm waiting on a text.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine.
Great. We love that.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Anyway, the monster study.
We might get through this today.
We might. Probably not. We have to, because I have to leave for work. But...
Yeah.
Oh, holy shit. Okay. Anyway, so this study was conducted in 1939 by Wendell Johnson and Mary Tudor at the University of Iowa.
Okay, you can stop right there. Mary Tudor, no thanks.
I know. I had to, like, when I was... First of all, Wendell Johnson is the dude on this side. Mary Tudor is the woman, obviously.
Yes.
When I was, like, looking for a picture of her, I had to, like, be like, Mary Tudor and Wendell Johnson, University of Iowa, because otherwise I was just getting, like, Mary Tudor. And I was like, no, wrong
Not
one.
the same.
But yeah, so Johnson was the one who was actually, like, conducting this study. He was a professor at, or not a professor, but he was, like, a researcher at the University of Iowa. And then Tudor was a graduate student.
Okay.
And she is the one who actually, like, carried out the, like, experiment or study or whatever. It's hard to describe it because it's not really, I guess it's a study. It's not really an experiment. I don't know. But anyway, she's the one who actually, like, performed the research, but she did it under Johnson's supervision. It was his study, you know.
Yeah.
He was so Wendell Johnson, he was a psychologist and an author. And like I said, he was a researcher within the field of psychology. And Mary was, like, one of the graduate students within the psychology department. So that's how they knew each other. But yeah, so he was a psychologist and an author, and then he was also one of the first proponents of general semantics. And that's a field of study in speech pathology that basically states that our language somewhat dictates our perception and our responses to the world around us.
Emma literally has a master's degree in this. We should have brought her
Emma?
in. Yeah.
Emma does? Okay, yeah.
She wrote
So,
her thesis on it.
on general semantics?
On something like that. Like
Yeah.
cultural semantics or something.
Okay, yeah.
I don't really know.
That's fine.
Sister.
Oh, I don't know jack shit about what my sister does. Something with reindeer, possibly moose.
Maybe
In
a
Alaska.
buffalo? Who knows?
Right? Like, that's all I got. She's explained it to me many times, and I just do not understand. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously, general semantics, like, goes much more in depth than that, but you don't really need to know it for this. Just know that it's basically, like, how your individual language and how you use language, it has an effect on your perceptions of yourself, the world around you, how you, like, interact with the world around you is affected by your use of language.
Okay.
That's really all that it means.
Okay.
And then Wendell's interest in general semantics is kind of what drove him to perform this particular study. But again, we don't have to have, like, a deep understanding of it.
Yeah.
And then Wendell initially got into psychology, and more specifically the psychology of speech, because as a child he developed a stutter around 5 or 6 years old. And I'll probably go back and forth between using the term stutter and the term disfluency throughout this episode, because stutter isn't really a term that's used anymore. Colloquially it is, but within the field of speech pathology it's not. Because it has connotations that come with it.
Yeah, that's like why you don't say hearing impaired anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's not, for lack of a better term, it's not PC. You say deaf, capital D deaf, lowercase d deaf, or hard of hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, yeah, stutter has that, if we do use the term stutter within speech pathology, we say a person who stutters.
Yes, you use person first language. So you don't say a deaf kid, you say a child who is deaf or hard of hearing.
I will say that even person first language is up for debate as to whether or not that is, like, I don't want to say the correct, but the preferred method, because a lot of people are like, you know, just a lot of people see it as, like, negating their, like, the impact that their disability has on them by putting it person first. So it's a very personal thing how
Yeah.
people want to use that. Because for some people, it's like, you know, a person with a disability, it's like, no, I'm just disabled. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? It just seems more, you know what I mean? So it's just, that's not a hard, that's not a hard and fast rule to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all very much personalized, and for oh my god, what am I trying to say? Like, when you're talking in a clinical sense, you're supposed to use it because unless you know the person's specified whatever.
I was gonna say, like, for our like ethical board in speech pathology, because we have to answer to an ethical board, is like, if you don't know a person's preferred way of referring to themselves, you use person first.
Okay.
Especially because a lot of speech disorders are presented in children or people who have had like some sort of accident, like a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, something like that. And so, or even like children who do stutter, a lot of times it's not from like birth or from like when they learn language, it develops later on. And so at least in this sense, we, again, depending, if you don't know a person's preferred way of referring to themselves, you use person first, because a lot of times it's not something that they were born with. And so they are a person before they are disabled, basically. But yeah, like you said, it's not a hard and fast rule. Certain people have different ways of like how they want to be perceived and all of that. So,
well, and even then, like in certain fields, that's not the rule either. Because in psych, like I don't say we. I'm not a psychologist, but I have a minor in it. They don't do that. They don't say you're a person with depression. They say you have depression or you are depressed. Like they don't, because it. So
well, and it's different because, like, with like depression, anxiety, things like that, those are like actual medical disorders.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, speech disorders are very different.
Yeah.
And they can be cultural. Like, capital D deaf is very different from lowercase d deaf. Like, it's a cultural thing.
It's hard to pin down, and you have to kind of like look at it from like the field of study context and then each individual person. So, but yeah, either way, like, I will go back and forth between disfluency and stuttering because it makes me personally uncomfortable to be like, oh, stuttering, because it's nowadays seen as very rude to be like, oh, they stutter, within the field of speech pathology. Again, colloquially, and back in the 1930s and all of that, that's how it was described. So like all the research that I did, like, they're like, oh, they had a stutter, they did this, blah, blah, blah. And like disfluency was not a term that was used back then. And so like I'll use stutter, but if I do happen to say disfluency because that's how I learned it, just know that I mean the same thing.
Okay, cool.
So
this has been not offending people with the triad.
Yes.
What this is called beating around the bush.
Yes.
This is called I am trying.
This is called my foot is asleep and I can't. I'm gonna fall on my chair.
My foot is asleep and I must scream.
Yes. Where was I in my notes?
Not very far. As always.
You said that Mr. Wendell.
Oh, yeah. He developed a stutter around 5 or 6 years old. That's kind of what started his interest in psychology and the psychology of speech. Keep in mind that, like, the field of speech pathology in the grand scheme of things is actually really new. And so, like, in the 1930s, like, it was not necessarily, like, speech pathology is a field of study. It was very much so that it was, like, psychology with a, like, focus on speech disorders.
Okay.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's, like, how everything starts. It's, like...
Yeah.
I don't know... alchemy, but with speech pathology. They're like, yeah, I'm interested in finding out this one thing that's not going to work, but anyway, here's, like, the birth of chemistry. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, because it was very much like they didn't understand, like, speech disorders at the time, and so it was like a new field of figuring out, is it even a psychological thing?
I just drew on my bedsheet with Sharpie on accident.
Great.
I love that for you. But yeah, anyway, so Wendell Johnson, he attended the University of Iowa in 1926. He got a degree in English, but then when he went for his master's, he switched to psychology. And then he stuck with psychology for his future research, blah, blah, blah. Also, just as a kind of like side note, the entire field of speech pathology was essentially founded on the research of disfluencies and stuttering. Because, like, if you think about it, like, a lisp or something like that, those are kind of like, I guess I would say minor speech disorders compared to like a stutter, because
you still have functional communication.
Yeah, and it's something that you have more control over. It's and at the time, people just considered, like, say you do have a lisp, or like you say your R's wrong or something like that, they would just be like, oh, you're uneducated, or like it's a dialectal thing, blah blah blah. Whereas a stutter, it can happen to anyone at any time. Not saying that the others can't, it's just at the time the thought process was. And so the field of speech pathology was founded on stuttering, and trying to figure out, like, why people stutter, where it comes from, because there are actually, like, multiple different types of disfluencies, whether it's, like, a whole word, a syllable, like a sound, like, I could go into it. I literally had an entire class on disfluencies, so, like, it's an entire thing. However, it is, like, the one speech disorder that we still have very, very little understanding of, and, like, there's no quote-unquote, like, cure for stuttering. There are workarounds. Some people outgrow it, some people don't. Some people develop it later in life. Some people have it from birth. We don't know whether it's, like, a genetic thing, a, like, brain thing. There's, like, we literally basically don't know anything about stuttering, and that's what this entire field is started off of.
Great.
And so it's one of those things that, like, there's been so much research done into it, both good and bad, and so this is just, like, one study that was done into stuttering. But yeah, keep in mind that, like, I'm not excusing anything that they did here. No. But it is the one speech sound disorder that, like, we really honestly to this day do not understand. So anyway,
even if you don't understand stuff, you still have to, like, practice ethics when you're studying it. So
exactly. So, like, yeah, it's a thing. Anyway, if you want to go to slide 3, also, like, all these pictures besides the two, like, the one of Johnson and the one of Tudor, like, all these pictures are what came up in a Google search for the monster study, but it's a bunch of children looking sad, so, like, I don't know.
They literally look like coal miners.
They do.
Yeah. So, like, I honestly...
Except for that... Who's that? Is that a teacher at the end, or, like,
I think so.
Frankenstein? Okay. She's got some crazy hair.
She does. But yeah, so I don't honestly know if these are, like, legit pictures of these children that were involved in this or not. I don't know. These are just the ones that came up, like, most often.
Yeah.
In my Google search. So, anyway. So in the fall of 1938, Johnson recruited Tudor to conduct a research study that he had developed in the hopes of better understanding the depths of stuttering. So for the experiment, they selected 22 orphan children from the Soldiers and Sailors Orphans Home in
Why do they
Davenport,
always
Iowa.
get orphans?
Hey, you know what would be great for our project? Some orphans.
It's
Oh my
because
God.
they
There's
were
no parents to
readily-
complain. Like,
Yeah, it's because they had no one
like
to
I know
answer
why,
to,
but
and they're
And we're allowed to beat them, you know.
yeah,
and it's like free.
yeah.
You don't have to compensate them in
God.
any way. You don't have to worry about whether you damage them for the rest of their entire life.
They're
Just
orphans, who
orphans.
cares?
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah. So
god.
yeah, so it was like a veterans orphans home in Davenport, Iowa. Not all of them were orphans though, because
Oh
there were
my
like
God, I have a story. Keep going.
okay, there were about 600 kids in this home, and a lot of them were the children of were orphans of like soldiers and stuff like that, but there were also a lot of kids who their parents just couldn't afford to have children, and so they gave them up to this orphanage.
Yeah.
Again,
Okay, here's a quick story.
Depression era.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, gosh.
Guys, listen. So I may have told you this one before, but I don't know if I told it on the podcast. My grandma used to drop my father and aunts and uncles off at the orphanage, just like as a babysitter.
Oh my god.
So
you have never told
One
me
time-
that.
No, you haven't told me that either.
okay, well one time
That is such
she
a
was like,
that is such a like
That's
Farley
such a Farley
to do.
thing.
it really is. So one time she was like incredibly pregnant with one of my, it was probably my aunt or maybe my uncle, I don't know. And she had my dad in the car, and my grandma didn't have her driver's license until after she had all of her kids, so she used taxis a lot. And so she was taking my dad to the orphanage in the taxi,
In a
and my
taxi.
dad is in the back seat the whole time screaming, "I don't want to go to the orphanage!" Because he just didn't like the kids there.
Yeah.
But he's like losing his shit, and like this like very
taxi
poor looking,
driver.
incredibly pregnant woman is dropping a kid off at the orphanage. And it was my dad.
That poor taxi driver.
I know, my grandma's like, he probably has nightmares about it. I don't want to go to the orphanage.
Oh my god.
But like, grandma had to go grocery shopping, so too bad, so sad.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness. That's such a Farley thing.
It is.
She used to drop them off at the orphanage all the time. Oh my god.
You know what?
man.
Free babysitting.
Yeah.
A healthy dose of trauma thrown in just for good measure.
Right?
Yeah, whatever. They
What?
terrorized her in other ways, so
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I mean, it all broke even at the end. In the end, not at the end.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. But yeah, okay, so they chose 22 children from the ages of 5 to 15 from this orphanage. And basically, because they wanted to study dysfluencies and stuttering, they talked to like the matrons of the orphanage, and they helped them select like which children to use. They wanted some who did stutter and some who did not. So they had
Okay.
let's see, 10 children who already presented with stutters, and then 12 children who did not.
Okay.
And then among these 22 children, they broke them down into 4 study groups.
Okay.
So they had Group 1A, Group 1B, Group 2A, and Group 2B. So Group 1A consisted of 5 children, and they were 5 children who already presented with a stutter, and they were given the label stutterers, although the goal for this group was to remove the label that was placed on them, and so their like interactions with these children was basically to tell them that they spoke perfectly well, they didn't have a stutter, like people were like mislabeling them, blah blah blah.
I'm sorry, they're fully gaslighting these children.
Yes.
Okay,
they are.
cool.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. So that was group 1A, was children who had a stutter and they were telling them that they spoke perfectly fine.
Okay.
Again, this is general semantics trying to figure out the perception of like how language or
Affects
figure
us.
out how their language affects their perception.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, group 1A, that's what they were. Group 1B was 5 children who were also labeled as stutterers. However, unlike group 1A, these children were not told that they spoke perfectly well.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, these children were told that they were stutterers and they were treated as such.
Okay.
So,
Treated as such.
I know.
It's just this is a really scary sentence.
I know.
It was, yeah.
Because it leads me to believe that they beat the stuttering out of them. Or attempted to.
They did not, they just told them that they were stutterers.
Okay.
And basically we're like, yeah, that's who you are. Okay. So group 2A was 6 children who did not have a stutter, but they were, within the study, they were labeled as stutterers. And so basically, they were children who spoke normally, but they told these children that they were stutterers and that there
Okay.
was something wrong with their speech.
So the other gaslighting group.
Yes. So the group A's are basically them telling them the opposite of what is the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. So group B is you're a stutterer. I'm telling you you're a stutterer.
Mm-hmm.
Group 2B was also 6 children. They did not have a stutter and they were not told that they had a stutter. They had no negative speech connotations placed on them.
Okay.
So they were kind of like the control group, essentially.
Yeah.
And then, so basically there's like 3 groups labeled as stutterers. One trying to remove that label, the other 2 basically keeping that label on them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one is kind of like the control group.
Mm-hmm.
And then each group of children was treated according to whatever their group was labeled as.
Okay.
So, you can see why it's getting a little unethical here.
Yeah. I don't see. Just keep explaining the experiment because I don't get it. But maybe if you explain it more, I will. Like I get
Okay.
it. I don't get what the point is, but just keep going, and I'll see if I can work it
To
out
be
myself.
dicks to children?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Basically. Okay, so if you want to go to slide, what are we on, 4? So for each child's first visit, tutor tested their IQ and identified whether they were left or right-handed. This was due to a popular theory at the time that stuttering was caused by an imbalance in the brain.
Oh my god.
And
You're too top heavy.
right. But basically, the thought process was that the imbalance came from, like, because at the time everyone was taught to be right-handed regardless, because, left-handedness is a sign of the devil or something.
My grandma, my mom's mom, she was a lefty. And she went to Catholic school, and my mom still remembers her, because, my mom's memory is shitty. She remembers her mother telling her that when she was in Catholic school, the nuns would, like, wrap her knuckles with a ruler anytime she tried to use her left hand.
Oh, yeah. No, that was a common
Yeah. Oh, no, that was
thing, like,
super common.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure they did that to my grandma.
Yeah, that happened to my grandmother. My mom is also a lefty, but by the time my mom came along, because she was the youngest of 7, her family was, like, dead broke, so they couldn't afford to send her to Catholic school, so she went to public school, so they didn't give a shit there.
They don't care what you do in public
No,
school.
They don't care what you do in public school.
You can get away with murder in public school.
You can. Unfortunately. But yeah, so, basically, it was thought that, like, the imbalance in the brain came from, like, if you were born left-handed, but used your right hand, the nerve impulses would misfire, and that would cause a disfluency in your speech.
Okay.
What the fuck are they experimenting on? Because there are a lot of moving parts in this.
Yeah.
Look, that's as deep as I'm getting into that thought process because it's not really relevant to this study. However, bad science, okay?
Yeah, like,
I'm just going with that.
If they're going with the theory that it's caused by an electrical impulse or something, I see where they're coming from. It's just that we know now that is just wrong. So
it's one step above, you have bad humors.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, I understand as far as, like, the disfluency part goes because, again, we still to this day don't know what causes it.
Yeah.
And so they're going off the theory that it's caused by some sort of electrical impulse or imbalance in the brain.
Yeah.
Which, again, could be. We still don't know. However... using your right hand when you're left-handed does not cause an imbalance so great that it's going to cause you to stutter.
No,
okay?
It does not. My my mom she's a lefty, but because the world is designed for right-handed people, which I hear that rant, because my stepdad is also left-handed, so we get that rant about once a month.
Oh, yeah.
They both have to use their right hand for a whole bunch of shit. They're fine.
I have many left-handed friends, and they're all like, I hate it.
They're like, I can't use scissors. Like, they hate it.
Also, just, like, driving a car is for right-handed people.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever think about that? Like, you're left foot dominant, but you have to use your right foot to drive. And I'm like, well, that explains why left-handed people are shitty drivers. They're not. I am not making that generalization.
No, can't confirm. Mom, Emma, you know.
No, I have many friends who are lefties who are good drivers. But cars are not made for them.
My mom's biggest thing is scissors. And then we tried to get her left-handed scissors one time, and she's like, I can't even figure these out because I got so used to using right-handed scissors.
Yeah, like, even just, like, a left-handed knife is different.
Oh, God, no.
And so, like, it's... Anyway, it doesn't cause a misfire.
It doesn't cause a stutter.
Bad
like,
that
no.
It makes you stutter. Anyway.
No.
And so... But that was a common theory at the time. And so Tudor tested their handedness by having them draw on chalkboards and then squeezing a dynamometer. I don't know how to say that word, so that's how I'm saying it.
Sounds right to me.
Right.
And
Sorry.
And that was because, again, all children were taught to be right-handed regardless, and so you had to do, like, these things to figure out which hand was actually the dominant one.
They couldn't just ask, which hand do you want to use? Your left hand or your right hand? Like,
well,
okay,
no,
but
because
also
then they'd be like,
orphans.
are you gonna hit me?
That's true. Yes, that's fair. That's true.
These are, like, abandoned children, and they're just like,
true.
you're gonna hit me, you're gonna tell me I'm, like, the spawn of Satan.
That's
or
true.
something.
Listen, I'm broken, and...
Also, it's 1939.
Yes.
So. But yeah, basically from these tests, it was determined that most of the children were right-handed. However, there were left-handed children present within each of the groups.
Cool.
So Johnson didn't actually believe in this theory of handedness as, like, a sign of cerebral imbalance or anything like that. He had Tudor do the test just to rule it out, basically. But yeah, so it wasn't actually part of his, like, overall theory or test or anything like that.
Yeah.
But because it was a popular theory at the time, he was like, we're just gonna do it, we're gonna get it out of the way, so people can't be like, well, this is the real reason, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in this study, it was determined that the handedness of each child had no actual correlation to their speech.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah.
Slide 5. Some more sad children.
Yay.
So the
It's like the orphanage is a bummer.
Gosh, who would have thought?
My dad knew.
Oh my gosh.
I hate playing with all these depressed kids. They're no fun.
I bet anytime like, your dad and any of his siblings tried to complain about anything, their mom was just like, well, at least you're not at the orphanage, like, permanently.
Yeah.
Like, well, I could drop you off at the orphanage.
Yeah.
She also canceled Christmas one time because somebody ate a brownie.
What?
And that mystery has never been solved.
Oh my god.
I think my dad took credit for it because he wanted Christmas to happen.
Yeah.
Because he was a good boy, but somebody ate a brownie and she was like, Christmas is fucking canceled, because it was like, I don't know, it was like the week of Christmas or whatever, and no one fessed up to it.
Was it...
That is also a very Catholic thing to do.
Why were they not supposed to eat the brownie, or...
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, feelings were running high in 1960, whatever the fuck.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
They were like hella poor, and so it was probably like, that was for Christmas! And you ruined it.
Right.
That was all you were getting this year.
Yeah, okay.
This is only tangentially related to that in that it's about Christmas. But my great grandma was all of like 90 pounds her entire life, and like, I don't know, like 5'2" or something, and so she was this tiny lady, and she used to dress up as Santa for Christmas every year, and like got fully into character and would be like, yeah, no, of course I'm Santa, here's your presents, ho ho ho, blah, blah, blah. We were like,
adorable.
Grandma, you're the tiniest person on the planet. Like,
Someone opened the door and you blew over.
right? Like, you are not a jolly old fat man.
Yeah.
Okay. I love you, but no.
Yeah.
No one's believing this.
And I can see your ribs under the pillow.
Right? Like, it was so funny because she was so cute, like, just so adorable. But yeah,
Anyway, sad children.
Right? Sad children. But yeah, so the experiment itself, again, it's hard to call it an experiment. But anyway,
Yeah.
It lasted from January to May of 1939, and basically Mary Tudor would drive from Iowa City to Davenport every few weeks or so, and she would talk with each child for about 45 minutes each during her visits.
Okay.
So during these talks, she followed an agreed upon script that Johnson had developed. So, for the children in group 1A, so that's the children that stuttered but would be told that they didn't, she would say, or it wasn't that they were told that they didn't stutter, it was that their stutter wasn't a problem, basically.
Yeah.
And they were trying to remove the label of stutterer from these children.
Okay.
So, her script for these children was, you'll outgrow the stuttering and you'll be able to speak even much better than you are speaking now. Pay no attention to what others say about your speaking ability, for undoubtedly they do not realize that this is only a phase.
Okay.
That's nice.
In a way. Basically, it was...
Don't let the haters get you down.
Yeah, so the point of the study was to see how their perception of their own stutter or their own speech would affect how their perception of their speech affected how they perceived themselves.
Okay.
As a person.
Yeah.
I guess. In a way. It's kind of hard because it's very, like, not a tangential thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these were children who had a stutter. They were being told that their stutter wasn't an issue. It was just a phase. They would outgrow it. They were fine. They were valid human beings, basically.
Okay.
So for group 1B, so those were the children that had a stutter and would be told that they were stutterers, she would say, the staff has come to the conclusion that you have a great deal of trouble with your speech. You have wrong group. This is group 2A, so it's children that didn't have a stutter but would be told that they were stutterers.
Okay.
Okay. So, it is, the staff has come to the conclusion that you have a great deal of trouble with your speech. You have many of the symptoms of a child who is beginning to stutter. You must try to stop yourself immediately. Use your willpower. Do anything to keep from stuttering. Don't ever speak unless you can do it right. You see how...
Oh my god.
You see how so-and-so stutters severely, don't you? Well, undoubtedly, he started this very same way.
So this is the super gaslighty group.
Yes.
Whew.
And then the B groups, or not the B groups, the 2A and 2B had, like, kind of, like, similar speeches, but it was very much like, you're a stutterer, you have a stutter, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you speak fine, you speak normally, whatever, sort of thing. But yeah, so for the group of children that didn't have a stutter but were being told that they did, it was very much like, you have a stutter, it's a terrible thing, you must not speak unless you can do it correctly, blah, blah, blah. And so, obviously, that had an effect on the kids. So the children in...
What? Really?
Right? Yeah. And so for like the 3 other groups, it didn't really have an effect on their speech or even really like their... It had some of an effect on like their perception of themselves, but on their speech, it didn't have an effect. On this group of children who spoke normally, but were told that they did not, they had like an immediate reaction. And so these are kind of like stories from like these children. So after her second session with 5-year-old Norma Jean Pugh, tutor wrote, "It was very difficult to get her to speak, although she spoke very freely the month before."
Well, gee, I wonder the fuck why.
Right. And then 9-year-old Betty Romp, she was another one in that group. She practically refuses to talk, is what she wrote in her final evaluation.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, and then, so she practically refuses to talk and held a hand or arm over her eyes most of the time. Hazel Potter was a 15-year-old. She was the oldest in the group. She became much more conscious of herself, and she talked less. And then Potter also began to interject and to snap her fingers in frustration. She was asked why she said, so much. And when asked that, she said, "Because I'm afraid I can't say the next word." And when they asked her, "Why did you snap your fingers?" it was, "Because I was afraid I was going to say, So.
You literally gave that child a disorder.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then all of the children within this group, their schoolwork began to like fall off. Their grades went down. One of the boys began refusing to recite anything in class. An 11-year-old Clarence Pfeiffer started anxiously correcting himself. He stopped and told me he was going to have trouble on words before he said them, tutor reported. She asked him how he knew. He said that the sound wouldn't come out. It feels like it's stuck in there. So, yeah. Another one, Mary Korlaski, she was a 12-year-old. She grew withdrawn and, fragile almost. And during their sessions, tutor asked whether her best friend knew about her stuttering. Korlaski muttered, "No." Tutor asked why not. And Korlaski basically, shuffled her feet and was like, "I hardly ever talked to her." And then 2 years later, she actually ended up running away from the orphanage.
Wonder fucking why.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And she actually ended up at another school, the industrial school for girls. But yeah, so basically they made this girl, she withdrew herself from her friends, would not talk to anyone, blah, blah, blah. Ended up running away and ending up at a rough school of yeah, so that's great. But yeah, so that was the 6 kids within that group. And then Mary Tudor herself had some issues with what she was doing.
Well, that's good at least.
Yeah, she after the experiment had officially ended, she actually returned to the orphanage on her own at least 3 times to provide follow-up care and to try and kind of reverse the effects of what they had done.
I was gonna ask, did they deprogram these poor kids and be
not officially.
Hey.
Mary tried to,
Okay.
but yeah, she basically, all of these kids that were within this group, she basically told them no, you didn't actually stutter after all. It was just part of this study. We were just trying to see how blah blah blah. However, yeah, it really didn't have an effect after the effect.
Yeah.
Because, like, they had
'cause they're already
already,
so fucked up.
yeah, they had already, like, put this idea in the kids' heads. And so she actually, like, wrote a letter to Johnson in, like, 1940. And basically it was, I believe that in time these children will recover, but we certainly made a definite impression on them.
It's one way of putting it.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. So, yeah, so it did not go great. It was not good. Kind of fucked up 6 kids for life. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine. And then, of course, if you would like to go to slide 7, there were...
I don't want to go to slide 7.
Sorry, more sad children. There were many criticisms of this study, even at the time, because a lot of his, like, fellow researchers and stuff saw it as being unethical, especially after the results came out. Mm-hmm. The study itself was never, like, actually published.
So we did this for nothing.
Yeah, they, like... They had the results from it and, like, the research and stuff, but they never actually published it because of all the backlash and criticism he got at the time.
Yeah.
So really all that we know from the actual study itself is what Mary Tudor wrote in her, like, journals, and we have, like, her research notes. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit of why we don't actually have, like, a ton of information on the study itself. Is because, like, other people were like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
You didn't find anything out. All you did was ruin these kids' lives.
Yeah.
So one of the many issues that came from this study was the fact that they used these children without any sort of informed consent. Like, these children had no idea what they were being studied for. Yeah. They thought they were just having conversations with these people. Yeah. And, like, that it had something to do with their schooling, blah, blah, blah. Like, they had no idea that they were even part of an experiment. And basically, the major issue that came from it is that they actually induced stuttering in all of these children who did not have a stutter beforehand. Mm-hmm. So, in a way, that's actually an accomplishment for this study, because it halfway proved his, like, the way that you perceive your language affects how you perceive yourself, and, like, if you perceive yourself as a stutterer, you will become a stutterer, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it, like, proved that, but it also really didn't prove that. And it was at the expense of these children.
Yeah.
Who had no idea what was happening.
Yeah. To me, it seems more like it proves that if you tell kids that they're going to fail at something, they're gonna fail at it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
All it proves is that, like, people are impressionable, and if you convince them that there is something wrong with them, then there will be something wrong with them.
Yeah, and it proves that, like, it proves how other people's language affects you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't prove, like, it's not even that they were perceiving themselves this way. They were told that this is factually what's happening. That's not a perception, right? Like,
yeah. And so, like, there's a lot of issues with the study itself.
Yeah.
And how it was set up. And, I mean, it's a hard thing to prove, his, like, theory or whatever, because there's not really a way to test it or to do any of that. But, like, the way that he tried to test it, obviously, like, lots of flaws, did not work, did not actually prove anything one way or the other. It was all kinds of messed up.
They could have done a survey of these kids and been like, hey, do you think, as someone with a stutter, do you think having a stutter affects you in X, Y, and Z, right? I mean, obviously, they're going to phrase it differently. And then they like, they literally could have just done a survey and asked these kids, like, hey, do you think having a stutter makes you perceive yourself more negatively? And then there you go. There's your answer.
And
Yeah.
then if you
Like-
do have a survey, you can do it with adults
Yeah,
as well.
you can also do it with
You
adults.
don't have to, like, abuse children to
Yeah.
get your answers.
Like,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't-
it's like all kinds of wrong. It's all kinds of unethical. Like it's
yeah,
it.
it's not a good
Yeah,
test for so
It's-
many different reasons.
yeah, it's terrible and it's awful. People rightfully criticized it and still
Yeah.
do to this day. They're like, yeah, no, like that's not how you go about studying
No.
disfluencies in any way.
No.
Johnson's son actually ended up like defending his study. Basically, he was, quote, harm was neither intended nor done as there is no evidence for permanent repercussions. Children were the only acceptable subject population for the hypothesis being based on developmental speech pathology. Informed consent in this case was provided as although deception of the children was required, the administrator of the orphanage provided consent. The experiment was limited in scope and time, being limited to only a few children and lasting only 1 semester. Finally, there was adequate post-study care for the subjects. All of that is false.
Yeah.
So,
the thing that stuck out to me was that informed consent was given because the person who runs the orphanage gave their consent.
yeah, that's not consent.
That's not, no, like, even, like, minors still have to give consent to things for, well, depending on what the thing is. For experiments, they need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know? And, like, why was
Just because
deception...
you don't have parents.
Yeah, why was deception necessary? Like...
Look,
Well,
because
and,
he
like,
didn't have a clear thesis. That's why it was necessary.
Well, and like, and
because
how does he know that no
he
permanent
didn't
harm
actually-
was done?
and they didn't have adequate post-study care.
Yeah,
Mary did it
We
of
went
her
over
own
that.
volition.
yeah, we already went over that. Yeah, no, but how?
There was no official post-study care. It was that Mary was like, oh, I feel shitty for doing this to these kids. Let me go talk to them and tell them they're actually okay.
Yeah,
And you don't know whether there was permanent repercussions
Yeah.
or not.
did he ask them
and
when they were adults?
It actually turns out that there were. Like, all of these kids ended up, like, it changed their entire personality.
Yeah.
So,
Oh my
like,
God.
Okay, that girl who ran away and ended up at an industrial school, weren't industrial schools basically, like,
They were
one
just,
step
like-
before prison?
yeah.
Yeah,
it
they
was,
were.
It's like
It was like a
juvie.
reform school,
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Anyway, that's gonna
it's-
fuck you up.
Anyway, yeah. And then in 1965, Wendell Johnson passed away, but he was in the process of writing an entry on speech disorders for the Encyclopedia Britannica that defended his work and his study. And he didn't actually end up completing this entry or essay or whatever. It ended up being around like 4,000 words. It was still published. He suffered a heart attack while he was in the process of writing it.
Because he was so burdened by his lies.
Okay, again, not defending this particular study. He did actually do many studies over the course of his life and research into speech disorders and actually pushed the field forward quite a bit. So
Yeah, but
he
I
did
understand.
a lot of good for the field of speech pathology. I am not using that in any way to excuse that this particular study was shit.
the quote-unquote father of modern gynecology also, like, performed all of his experiments on enslaved
Yeah.
women. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like,
again,
I
like
feel like a lot of people who
time
are
period
who are
in
novel to their-
context, like
Yeah.
I get it. He did a lot of like, and a lot of fields have this problem where good
the
results.
founders are shitty.
Well, the founders are shitty, and like we have a lot of like good knowledge and results from really unethical, really shitty experiments, like things that cannot be done to humans, should not be done, cannot be done, like, and
The entire field of
It's-
psychology is like that. Like,
exactly like. So, I mean, we literally talked about like grave robbers and shit. So like, And
Deaf
that's
education, they used to
Yeah.
tie kids' hands down so they couldn't sign at each other.
Yeah.
yeah.
If they
So
went to oral
like
schools.
that there's a lot of shit that was done to actual living human beings that progressed science in ways that have been beneficial, but it was not gone about in any sort of good way.
Yeah.
Like, this experiment in particular, though, just seems completely...
This is very similar
Unnecessary.
It's very
to the
unnecessary.
Albert experiment, where they induced a fear of rabbits in him.
Yeah.
Yeah, little Albert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no point to
And
that.
so-
like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like this feels very similar to that in that
right.
you're basically just like, yeah, psychologically we're getting information, but you are ruining someone's life by doing so.
yeah. Well, and there are other ways of getting that information without traumatizing
Exactly.
children. You know?
Exactly.
So,
But again, it was 1939, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Part of the reason he didn't actually publish the results is because of World War II and the Nazis and eugenics and all of the negative feelings around that. That's also why there was such heavy criticism of this experiment at the time.
Yeah. He was probably like,
yeah.
oh no, I'm one of them.
yeah.
Yeah, because it was very much not necessarily a eugenics experiment, but it had similar veins of thought.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, people were very much like, oh no, we want to get away from anything that has to do with Nazism, blah, blah, blah. Like, we are not that type of, like, society. And
We are secretly, but on the surface,
Yeah.
we will pretend not to
right,
be.
exactly. And so he didn't publish the results. The results of the study were freely available in the library of the University of Iowa, though.
Okay.
And so, like, a lot of people within the field, like, knew of the study, knew the results of it. But yeah, that's why there was, like, such a backlash, is because of World War II, eugenics, Nazism, all of that. Because had that not happened, I'm not sure there would have been such criticism at the time.
Yeah.
Obviously, today, yes. And, like, when I was in college for speech pathology, we, like, talked about this study, but it was very much a, like, in my disfluency class, it was very much a, like, this happened and it was terrible, and we do not perform experiments in this way on disfluencies, and that's part of why we don't know so much about disfluencies, is because we have to go about it in an ethical way. This is one of the main studies and experiments for why speech pathology has an ethical board that we have to answer to. Like, we get audited, like, every single year. And we have to, like, report absolutely well, we don't get audited every year, but we have to keep records of everything that we do in case we get audited, and it is not unlikely that you will be audited. No matter what field of speech pathology that you work in, you have to keep accurate and detailed records so that you can go back should anything happen and be like, on this day at this time for this amount of time we talked about this specific thing, here were the results. So, like, we have to keep very heavy records of absolutely everything that we do, every, like, client that we see. And this study, it's not the only reason, but it is one of the big reasons why we have to do that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, quite frankly, as someone who will eventually intend to go into speech pathology as a clinician, like, I appreciate that we have an ethical board that we have to answer
for
to.
sure.
Like, I think that's a very good thing, because there are many ways that speech pathology could go wrong.
I think everything should have an ethical board. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Like, do you know
No,
how
I
many...
mean, I just showed you guys the video that I had to watch for work that was like, how to not break the law when you have to physically restrain a child so they don't kill someone.
Yeah.
Or themselves.
Like,
Yeah, and because, like, speech pathology, like, we are affecting how they communicate, which affects your entire life. Like,
yeah.
we have to keep these records, and I appreciate that they monitor that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again, it's a speech disorder. There's no saying you're gonna, like, cure it, like,
Yeah.
quote unquote, because, like, it's not an illness,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone speaks differently, and so, like, if your speech ends up later in life, like, negatively affecting your life, like, it could come back to your speech pathologist or whatever, depending on situations, of course.
Yeah.
And so, like, we have to be able to prove that, like, no, I did everything to the best of my ability, and, like, efficacy and efficiency, all of that. Like, I did what I could. From that point on, it is you.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. But yeah, anyway. Um, da da da. Um, and then, so back to this particular case. This study actually kind of came to light in 2001. It kind of became like national news. Because a series of articles were conducted by an investigative reporter at the San Jose Mercury News. And then a book titled Ethics, a Case Study from Fluency was written to provide kind of like an impartial scientific evaluation of the study. And this book and the articles were written by like a panel of authors, mostly speech pathologists. And basically that whole panel of authors, they didn't reach any consensus on whether the ethical ramifications or scientific consequences of this study. They like didn't reach a consensus on what those ramifications were, whether it was ethical or not.
Mm-hmm.
But in chapter 6 of the book, which actually I really want to find this book now so I can read it, Richard Schwartz, who was one of the authors, he concludes that the monster study, quote, was unfortunate in Tudor and Johnson's lack of regard for the potential harm to the children who participated and in their selection of institutionalized children simply because they were easily available. The deception and the apparent lack of debriefing were also not justifiable. And so a lot of the other authors concur with that statement, claiming that the orphan experiment was not within the ethical boundaries of acceptable research. However, there are others who felt that the ethical standards in 1939 were different from those used today, and based on that context, it was okay. It is not okay. But I also see their point, because the standards back then were different.
Standards.
But, so, like, I see their point, but also, like, no, not justifiable in my mind. So, yeah, some felt that the study was poorly designed and executed by Tudor. She's not the one who designed it, though. She was just doing what she was told. She was a graduate student, so I don't think all of the blame could fall on her.
Blamed.
Yeah.
It's because we're blaming the woman here.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not going to say that, but we are.
She could have said no, but at the same time, I don't think that she should have the majority of the blame put on her.
She's
because,
not
again,
the one who designed the
experiment,
and she was just following the script that Johnson wrote for her.
Well, I mean,
and she tried to go back and like reverse the effects. She couldn't,
and he didn't. So
yeah. Well, and I mean, she's a grad student, a female grad student in 1939. Could she have said no?
Right, exactly.
Like, really?
This is like her opportunity.
Yeah,
There's
like,
not a lot you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't like that this sentence implies that she is to blame for it, okay? That I don't like. The study was poorly designed and it was poorly executed, but I don't think all of the blame for that falls on Tudor. I think most of it falls on Johnson. But, okay, so some felt that the study was poorly designed, and as a result, the data offered no proof of Johnson's subsequent hypothesis that, quote, stuttering begins not in the child's mouth but in the parent's ear, i.e. that it is the well-meaning parent's effort to help the child avoid what the parent has labeled stuttering, but is, in fact, within the range of normal speech, that contributes to what ultimately becomes the problem diagnosed as stuttering. Again, he didn't have a clear hypothesis, because that does not make sense.
That's just like a cool sentence that he wanted people to read.
Yeah.
It's like, look how poetic I can be. But it doesn't have any, like,
It's
there is no hypothesis, like you said. It's just like,
yeah, it's a lot of fluff of like, oh,
yeah.
the parents are perceiving that their child has an issue with their speech and therefore saying that the child has an issue with their speech and therefore the child has an issue with their speech. Like, no.
I would like to back up and say these children didn't have parents, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not like
exactly.
they had
And, like,
the kind of home life that he is projecting onto them, saying like if their parents always say like, oh,
yeah,
Billy
so
has a
like
stutter, blah blah
there's
blah.
so much wrong with your hypothesis, with your study, with like absolutely everything that you did, that like none of this makes sense. So like just stop. Just stop.
Can you hear my cat purring?
No, but maybe.
Oh, sure, I will
I put
later.
her right on the microphone.
Right. Oh, Peppa. But yeah, so if you want to go to slide 8, so
I am behind.
No.
yes.
Oh, now I know why you were mad about a
No!
building earlier.
Yes, this is why I was mad about a building. Okay, so on this slide is a picture of the Wendell Johnson Speech and Hearing Center. This is located at the University of Iowa. It is the home of their speech pathology program. Again, he did a lot of good for the field. He did a lot of research, pushed the field forward quite a bit. However,
He did it by traumatizing children.
yeah, he also did a lot of unethical studies, and a lot of his results and research were at the expense of innocent, unknowing people without informed consent, and I don't agree with that, and therefore I think they should rename this building. However, that is not my choice. Anyway, this is why I'm mad about a building. I understand why they named it after him. I do. I just
Don't agree with it.
I don't agree with it, and I think it should be changed now that it is 2021. Anyway.
Yeah, this is related, I promise. So my law school, the physical building, they named after one of the professors. And that professor's a dickhead, and he's a terrible professor. And so I'm just like, really? We named it after him? Like, he sucks.
Right. Right. Like,
so
I understand it. I just hate it.
we should just
okay?
stop naming buildings after people, because all people are garbage. Like,
Literally, just call it the University of Iowa Speech and Hearing Center.
yeah, it doesn't
please
need
and
to have a
thank you.
name. Like,
Full stop.
yeah, it doesn't need to be
Okay.
named after an actual person.
That's all. Anyway, so because of that article in the San Jose Mercury News in 2001, which was conducted by an investigative reporter, this article revealed that several of the orphans had long-lasting psychological effects stemming from the experiment. Go figure.
Yeah.
And so a lawsuit was brought to the state of Iowa because of this article revealing this. And so the state tried unsuccessfully to have the lawsuit dismissed, but in September of 2005, Iowa's Supreme Court justices agreed with a lower court in rejecting the state's claim of immunity and petition for dismissal. So many of the children, or former children, testified that they were harmed by the monster study, but outside of Mary Tudor, who testified in a deposition on November 19, 2002, there were no eyewitnesses besides Mary Tudor. So it was basically the children and Mary Tudor were the ones who testified.
Yeah.
So the advanced age of the 3 surviving former orphans on the plaintiff's side helped expedite a settlement with the state.
Wait, never mind. Sorry.
Okay.
And then this is a quote. For the plaintiffs, we hope and believe it will help provide closure relating to experiences from long ago and to memories going back almost 70 years. For all parties, it ends long-running, difficult, and costly litigation that only would have run up more expenses and delayed resolution to plaintiffs who are in their 70s and 80s.
Well, and Mary Tudor would have had to have been nearly 100 at that point.
Yeah, like she was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they came to a settlement. So, despite the settlement, the debate remains contentious over what harm, if any, the monster study caused these children. Wendell Johnson's son vehemently defends his father. He and some speech pathologists have argued that Johnson did not intend to harm the orphan children and that none of the orphans were diagnosed as stutterers at the end of the experiment. I don't care about that at all.
I don't care if you don't intended it. Harm was still done. And
right, like your intention doesn't matter in
No.
cases like this.
to me,
and
it doesn't
also,
matter ever, because if you caused harm to somebody, you caused harm to somebody. I don't give a shit if
right,
you meant
like
it or not.
you don't get to say like, oh,
Well,
I
I
didn't
didn't
cause
mean
you
it.
harm because I didn't mean to. Like you
Yeah.
caused them harm. They had consequences of
Yeah, like-
your actions. So like it doesn't matter.
That's horseshit. And then also,
and
with
just
the,
because none of them were diagnosed
Yeah.
as stutterers doesn't mean anything. Like
okay, and
you.
they
just
were
because they were-
orphans. Like, how could they?
Well, that,
like-
and just because they weren't diagnosed as a stutterer doesn't mean you didn't affect them psychologically.
yeah, like that's
So you didn't give them an actual, like, speech disorder, so what?
yeah. Don't listen to children defending their parents. Like, it never goes well.
Like,
like, no, guys.
no.
You just don't want to admit that your dad's a piece of shit. That's all it is.
Exactly, like, no. And it's not like this particular study, like, did anything to progress the field. All it did was ruin
it didn't even
these
get
6
published.
kids' lives.
So you probably
Like-
can't even use it for research because it was never published.
Yeah.
Like,
You can use it for research on child abuse, but
Yeah.
that's about it.
Exactly. Like, no. And then other speech pathologists have condemned the experiment and said that the orphans' speech and behavior was adversely affected by the negative conditioning they received.
yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
Letters between Mary Tudor and Wendell Johnson that were written shortly after the experiment ended showed that the children's speech had deteriorated significantly. Mary Tudor returned to the orphanage 3 times to try to reverse the negative effects caused by the experiment, but lamented the fact that she was unable to provide enough positive therapy to reverse the deterioratory effects.
There we go.
I was like,
That's
that
a
is
hard word. I would not be able to say that. Too many R's.
Dicterous.
Right. And so, like, it can be proven that there were effects on these children, both
Yeah.
on their language and their mental state, that lasted.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a post-experiment, like, therapy
Yeah.
to reverse the effects of what they had done.
Yeah.
And so, like,
And,
you
like-
can't defend it with just being like, well, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. And like
Okay, cool.
So what?
But, like,
I
it
didn't mean
happened.
to murder my neighbor, but it happened, so I'm going to
that's
jail.
still
Like,
manslaughter.
exactly. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Um,
It's fucking stupid.
it's
Like,
and
I-
I know that was like an extreme example of like I didn't mean to, but like
No, but like
sometimes you have to put things into extremes
it,
to get the point
it
across.
applies
So,
like to other situations.
I didn't mean to back over them with my car.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
vehicular
but you
manslaughter.
did.
right? Or just like, oh, I didn't mean to run my car into the one next to me, and it's like, cool, but you still did, so you still like your insurance still has
is
to
gonna
cover
go
that.
up. Yeah, exactly. Like
Like-
that doesn't fucking matter, guys. Like your intention means
Intention-
nothing.
Doesn't mean anything.
It means
it's the actual
absolutely
act.
nothing.
It's the actual act and the cause and effect. Okay, like.
Yes.
Ugh.
Can you tell I
Anyway.
was raised with adults who constantly tried to be like, well, I didn't mean to do that. It's like, okay, cool. You still fucking did it, so I'm allowed to be mad.
I'm still traumatized.
Yeah.
Okay, like
I still have the trauma, so I don't really know what to tell you.
right? Like, at some point, you have to take responsibility for your actions and your
Yeah.
choices. And
This is why I don't talk
Part
to
of-
certain members of my family anymore.
yeah, same. And part of why it bothers me that like certain like resources try and underhandedly blame Mary Tudor
Oh, yeah,
bothers
no.
me because
Yeah.
she
It's not her
tried
fault.
to go back, she tried to help, she like testified in this court thing and apparently was like very honest in it
Mm-hmm.
of like she regrets it and like obviously like no, she shouldn't have done it, but at the same time, like, what we discussed, like, she might not have really had much of a choice, and
Yeah.
so...
Well, and plus, like, it wasn't her experiment.
Yeah, and so, like, I'm not, again,
So-
not necessarily excusing her part in it,
No,
but,
no,
like,
no, no.
she tried to provide, like,
Well, and, like,
reparations.
even if she realized that they were harming these kids, like, during the experiment, even if she went to Johnson and was like, hey, I think we need to stop this experiment, he wasn't gonna stop it.
Right, and
know what
I don't know
mean?
if she did. She could have, based off her letters after the fact.
But, like, even
it was
if she
very much
had,
that, like,
what good would that
we
have done?
did something to these kids, and,
Yeah.
like, we need to fix it. And he was like, yeah, no.
Yeah. And it's
So-
still, like, those kids needed, like, actual therapy after that.
Exactly.
Which I
Yeah,
don't think
good luck.
she... Exactly, but that's the thing. Like, I don't think she could have provided that, but, like, they were also orphans
No.
in the 30s, so, like, in
I
Iowa...
was gonna say this.
So-
It's 1939.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of therapy
Yeah,
going
there's
on.
not, like,
Right,
real
yeah.
therapy. They're still working off of Freud, which is not real therapy.
Yeah. So,
Shannon, earlier when you kind of saying that still manslaughter, it made me think of, first of all, Freud, and second of all, the castration sign that we made
Yes.
in that
In our
Victorian
Victorian
class.
sexuality literature class. Yeah. The book we read, I don't even remember what book it was, but we used a Freudian analysis on it, and so one of our, was it our classmates, or was it actually our professor made a sign that just said castration and just held it up anytime it was relevant?
I think a classmate made it,
Yeah.
but the professor, like, danced around with
Yes, it was amazing. Because it was actually very
Castration.
relevant. Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
it. That's still manslaughter.
Yeah.
That's what it made me think of. Trying to hold it in.
Yes.
I'm also angry knitting. Like, I'm so mad right now. I've gotten so much work
Yeah.
done. But, like,
Yeah.
my hands are so sweaty because I'm, like, really pissed off.
Shelby, do you
Right.
need to leave for work soon? It's like 12:15.
I do, yes. In about 15 minutes,
Yeah.
I need to leave for work. So, closing statement, I'm actually done.
Okay, I
That's
kinda
really
figured
all
we
I have
were,
on this.
so-
Just like closing thing is that today I kind of already mentioned this, but the American Speech Language Hearing Association, ASHA, that's our governing board for speech pathologists. They prohibit experimentation on children when there exists a significant chance of causing lasting harmful consequences.
Yep.
So,
That's how psych stuff is usually.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the exact same phrasing, but that's the general idea.
yeah. And like I said, ASHA is also like our ethical board. They're our governing body and everything. Like, we have to be certified through them. We have to go through like an externship, like all this like clinical training. We have to have a certain number of hours, and then like every year we have to like reapply basically in order to be a working certified speech pathologist. This is who we answer to. I quite like them, and like, even like, say someone was to like break one of the I don't really want to call them rules, but like be providing speech therapy that is unethical in any way, like, you can report them to ASHA, and then they literally send it out in a newsletter to every speech pathologist who
Look at
is
this dick.
under them. It doesn't always have their name. There's like different levels and stuff, but like, if they essentially like are decertified and like kicked out of ASHA, like, you get their name and like all of the like consequences of like whether they're allowed to reapply in like 5 years or something, or if they're banned for life and like not allowed to work as a speech pathologist. Like, there are heavy repercussions for not following the ethics board. Like, we had an entire semester-long class that was just the ethics of speech pathology. So,
We have a class for, because lawyers obviously also have that.
Yeah.
It's the model rules of professional responsibility. I had a class on
Yeah.
that, and I got a B-. So.
I mean, hey,
I wasn't
Whatever.
taking the bar anyway. Like, I literally had
Right?
to take that class to graduate, or else I wouldn't have bothered. But,
yeah.
because that's part of the bar exam. It's the MPRE. It's basically all these, like, ethical questions.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean,
People fail it all the time.
I am of the agreement that most, if not all, fields should have an ethical board that they have to answer to.
There should be something.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is the monster study. yeah, that's all I got for you.
right.
It's shit. It makes me mad. I learned about it in school, and all of my professors were like, yeah, no, this was terrible, and don't ever do this, and you will be kicked out, and we will claim that we never knew you or taught you, and we will get that newsletter from Asha, and we will
Put it on our blog.
put it on our blog and be like, I am ashamed that I ever knew this person,
Yes.
but also I never knew them. So
Shame.
we literally, like, our professor, like, went on this whole rant one class period. He was like, you will not, I will disown you all as my students. And I was like, okay, Panico,
Dishonor
like, calm
on
down.
you, dishonor on your cow.
It's literally like that scene from Game of Thrones where she's, like, walking down and they're just like, shame, shame. And I was
Oh,
like,
I was thinking of that scene from, have you guys seen What We Do in the Shadows?
The movie?
no.
Yeah.
I have, but it's been a minute.
You know when they take him out in the backyard and they're like, they like tell him we're gonna do this horrible thing to you, and they just walk around him and point at him and say, shame!
Yes!
Oh my gosh.
When it sounds like they're taking him to like this crazy high tribunal, but it's just them in their backyard going, shame!
It sounds like he's
shame."
on his way to be executed, and then they just go around.
They're just in the
Right.
backyard.
Yes.
And they're like, alright, we're done. What do we want for dinner?
Yeah.
That's basically.
Oh my gosh.
More like, who do we want for dinner? Anyway.
Anyway.
But yeah, so that's all I got for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Treat human beings like human beings. That's all I really gotta say.
Yep.
Yep.
And our ending is that we have no ending.
Okay, thanks, bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to The Triad. Our music is by Scott Buckley. Our audio is recorded by our sound engineers, Craig Bott and Audrey Credo.
If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Tumblr as The Triad Podcast.
We're also on Patreon as The Triad. Currently, all Patreon funds will go towards the cost of hosting the show. Each tier has its own rewards, but every patron receives our undying gratitude. Do you have comments, questions, or stories? Email us at thetriadpod@gmail.com. And thank you again for listening to The Triad, where we're spooky but sensitive.